Tom, what a pleasure it is to sit down with you today, mate. How are you? Feeling hungry?
I'm always really hungry. No, thank you for having me. It's my total pleasure to be here. And yeah, I will always be hungry. The answer to that question will never be no. So, just
I'm
for the
s-
record,
I'm sorry, mate. You must hear that every day
I
now.
apologise.
Seriously.
No, I'm very happy to hear it. I nearly got run over the other day, walking back from my daughter's school, and someone screamed out the window, and I thought they hadn't seen me, and then they just screamed out the window, "I'm feeling hungry." Okay, that's hang on, trying to kill me, and just shout at me at the same
You have to
time.
think what everyone else is thinking. What is going
I
on?
know. Listen, I've said
Uh,
before, I'm very aware how weird it is for people, especially those that don't realise that the character's based on a real person, that it's a very weird experience to see a man from 1403 walking down the street in central London on a Tuesday morning.
how have you been, mate? How is everything? I know what a success this game's been. Incredible game. My favorite of the year so far. How are you feeling? I think it's been a month, has it? Or nearly a
Yeah,
month
it had
since
just over a
release?
month. Yeah, a month
Yeah.
and 2 days.
How are you feeling?
I feel really proud actually of Warhorse more than anything. I feel and what they and we've all achieved together. I think there was this like absolute resolute belief in the building every time I would go over there. This kind of absolute faith in what they were doing, which doesn't mean, of course, there were moments of doubt and worry and
Yeah.
angst and all the rest of it. But there was this like sense of direction and drive always in that building that they were making something really fantastic. And obviously, our involvement is slightly removed from that. So you kind of go in and do the motion capture and voiceover, but you don't have a great sense of the developmental journey of the game in terms of what's actually going on in terms of playability, what's actually being executed. And so I think the success has just completely validated all that belief and all the talent in that building. Um, you go, yeah, they were right. Of course, we knew how talented they were, but the fact that it's been received so amazingly by the fans and critically and otherwise, is just it's really amazing. And I just feel like super proud. I've spent more time working with those people than I've ever spent working with any other team in my professional life, and they're amazing. It's very easy to say that, and it just sounds like PR spin, but it's not PR spin. It's completely from the heart that every individual with whom I've crossed paths on that job is special and hugely talented. And I just think this is their moment in the sun, and they deserved it. It's been a long time coming. So
Well, I hope you're proud of yourself, right? Because I feel like this
yeah,
is a
I am. I'm
hell
proud of
of a
all of it.
job, man.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I am
Uh,
proud of myself, but I'm very aware that I'm a cog in a very big machine. It's kind of so in solely in acting terms, that's obviously quite an isolated thing, and sort of playing the playable character is a very particular challenge, particularly in terms of the size of the voiceover and all that stuff. So I'm really proud of that, and I'm really proud of. But even that is incredibly collaborative because on the motion capture stage, you have a lot of brilliant voices inputting. In the voiceover, you have generally two people working with you on any given moment of the game. And even they, it's usually different people for every session, each 4 hour session. So often like the director of a particular side quest or whatever it is you're doing, and then a sound engineer. But all of those individuals, which was a big team, they were kind of moving in and out in different pairs, are all amazing. And so I think that's where, yeah, I am really proud of what I've achieved. But there's no way that we could have done any of what we've done without having each other's backs. And I think that sort of sense of collaboration, maybe it sounds a bit sentimental, but it's completely true. And in the case of Warhorse, yeah, they're an amazing studio.
well, I know you're not a huge gamer, but Luke obviously is a bit of a gamer, and I asked him who's his favorite gaming character of all time, and he said you. He
Correct
said
answer.
Henry, which
Good.
I
You got
thought
my
was I thought that was
shout.
pretty cool. That I think that just goes to show kind of the camaraderie you guys all have.
Yeah, I mean, I think luckily for Luke and I, we have a sort of inbuilt chemistry, if you like, that we've had pretty much from when we met. We were talking the other day in an interview about when we met. We can't remember this precise day, but it absolutely would have been during the first motion capture of the first game. And we kind of always had this sense of fun, this sense of play, and it immediately kind of connects into the dynamic of the two characters. Um, so yeah, if you were to ask me who my favorite character is, the answer would be Hans Capon. So I'll back
Hey,
that.
we were hoping you'd say
No,
that.
It's great, and
Uh,
it's also true of like, I mean, what Luke and I have is really special, and like, I love that people are kind of responding to that and kind of running with what we built, and that also extends to the whole cast. The second game, there's a much bigger palette of central characters. This kind of band of brothers and sisters who have been put
oh,
together.
what a
And
cast!
yeah, amazing, like really amazing people. And I've said before, but like many of those people were brought over from the UK, but a lot of them are Prague-based English-speaking actors. There's this amazing community in Prague itself because so much film and TV production happens there. That is this relatively small but incredibly talented pool of people, and they play pretty much all of like the surrounding characters, which, as you know, is like a huge cast of
Oh,
people, and they're amazing. They just come in and like throw out some new accent and look and sound completely different. We obviously know it's the same person, but yeah, that kind of blew me away, and they're just lovely. It's a very sort of tight knit, talented community.
but who played Mutt? That was probably the greatest performance I've seen by a dog in a game.
I don't know. I have to say, so that little bit they put out yesterday, it's actually because it's a piece of kind of stock footage, if you like. That's somebody else playing Henry. So I wasn't there that day, so I actually can't speak
Ah,
for that moment. And I don't recognise the guy. I don't know who that is. Usually, it was the same people on the set on
yeah.
the motion page. But I don't know who that was. But I salute him. That was an amazing bit of acting. Well, we had one of the sort of like apocryphally, well, it's not apocryphal because it's true, but the kind of cliches of drama school in this country is that you often have to do animal work, and it's
Yeah.
actually really valuable on a kind of on a level of movement. It's a really really valuable thing to do, but it's also like a bit of a running joke in drama schools that you have to basically start pretending to be your animal, and then often other years will come in and watch you, and they'll do like they did a little zoo at ours, so like all the other years people come in and like feed your animal and stuff, and it's incredibly helpful and incredibly humiliating at the same time. And so I think I know what it feels like for whoever that guy was playing Mutt. I've felt his pain and joy.
Hey, did you know what you were getting into with this game? Like the 500 plus hours in the booth? Like they don't word you up on that, do they?
No, because I don't I
Uh,
don't think I don't think they knew
yeah,
when
yeah,
we started. So we definitely knew that the second game was much bigger.
yeah,
That was no surprise. But in terms of like hours, it would be impossible for them to know because you obviously have no like some stuff you sail through. So like all the herbal stuff where it's variations on a theme, but I think it's probably like 25, 30 odd herbs. So you're rattling through the same lines, but just changing the name of the herb. That stuff will be incredibly quick. But then
yeah,
you get to the more kind of emotional stuff or the stuff that's more nuanced, which is a lot of it because the writing is so good in this game, and it just takes longer. So they can't just go, oh, we've got 700 lines that'll take us X amount of time. It's a bit of a kind of suck it and see exercise. So there was no way, but none of us thought it was going to be that volume of material, and that years later I'd still be doing those 8 hour sessions.
So you can't possibly prepare, can you? You're reading it for the first time moments before delivering it.
No, they did. So in KCD1, they did used to send it to me before, and I would read it to the extent that you could, that volume of material.
Mm.
But this time round, I think they realised. I guess there was, fortunately for all of us, a much greater level of trust in terms of we knew,
Yeah,
at least I knew the character. I know the character inside out better than any other character I've ever played. So it's kind of like putting on a suit that fits you really well, and doesn't. I kind of feel like I know how he would respond to any situation now because he's been
yeah.
in situations that a human can be. I know how tone works. I know, and the joy of the second game was finding out all the variations that the player's going to choose. So that was the real challenge. I knew the core character, but kind of taking him into these different corners of super stoic and honest, or totally like Machiavellian and dark, and everything in between. That took a lot more time and work, and I was really kind of forensic about making sure that I did that in a detailed and kind of honest way.
Mm.
But in terms of like who he is at baseline, Henry, that was all there. So I didn't really need to see the lines, certainly not for voiceover, because you just could like you'd be up all night looking at it and then recording it all day. So you physically you have to sight read it. And what I generally did, and they were brilliant about this, was I'd always do usually a minimum of 2 or 3 takes. So the first one is like
Wow.
finding your way around the line.
Hmm.
Sometimes that's usable, often not. Second one generally is you're getting there, and the third one, if it's in any way sort of a bit more thoughtful and challenging, then you can like really pin in the detail. And we just got a rhythm, me and the directors, of just like knowing that routine, and they were really good about letting me kind of ask for another one if I thought I needed it, which was most of the time because I'm a bit I'm a bit of a stick.
Perfectionist.
Yeah, I am a bit, and like
Yeah.
especially with this because I thought, it's an expensive game, it's an enormous game. People are investing like a huge amount of their time and energy in it. We've got this incredible fan base that we can talk about later, but so there's a sense of like duty, not
Yeah.
to like not to phone it in, like that
Of
would just
course,
be
you care.
really disrespectful. I really do care. I do. I mean, I do about my job anyway. But I don't want to sound kind of worthy or overly earnest, but I do really care about this game, and I really care about this character. And the kind of the relationship between it and him and the fan base is so much more connected than it would ever be on a kind of TV or theatre project.
You want to do the writing, the extraordinary writing justice, as you said.
Yes, exactly. And because it's well written, it takes more thought and effort and time. If it was two-dimensional, you could phone that in, but who would want to do that for 500 hours of their life?
So obviously you said you know the character inside and out. When there's these different branching dialogue paths and you can kind of play him a few different ways, is that challenging for you? Because is it sometimes something you don't think he would say?
It's sort of never that because Dan, who oversees the kind of core of Henry's journey and everybody around him, this amazing team, they know him inside out, and so there was never anything that I'm like he wouldn't say that. It
Yeah.
feels like that. But in terms of your first question, in terms of the challenge of that was probably that is this for me the single biggest challenge of this second game that and actually the most rewarding one because there was a certain degree of scope to do that in KCD1, but inevitably, it being a much smaller animal, uh,
Mm.
the kind of scope within which you could do that and kind of mold Henry to your particular tastes wasn't as big. In the next game, that's one of the biggest selling points of the whole idea is like you choose, you get to do what you want to do. You will create, carve out the character that you want and kind of follow the path that you want to follow with that character that you've sculpted, if you like, and that is fascinating and thrilling and so beautifully realized in the writing. But then obviously the onus is on me to kind of make sure that I honor that writing and really give it that detail. And that was definitely the biggest challenge because that isn't linear when you're recording it. You're not like, right, we're going to go through the whole game as this version, and then we'll
Oh,
start
of
again as
course
that.
not. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
obviously you're literally you'll go a little way down a journey and then you'll come back up to the beginning of that quest and then you'll go down a different path and then you might go halfway back up and then so you're constantly dancing between the different versions of the character. So you're just
Jeez.
constantly switching gears.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I was really meticulous with the directors and they were really meticulous with me on making sure that we were really precise because in an 8 hour day, you get to like 4 o'clock and you've been at it for 6 hours. Your brain could easily start to go a bit soft and sort of miss those details. And that I was really sort of anally strict with myself about that. That I was like, I'm not going to let those last couple of hours be the
But
soft hours.
how are you strict with yourself? What are you putting into practice?
Asking questions, so making sure
Yes.
that if I wasn't clear, because the brilliant thing about having those different directors, all of whom have worked on a particular chapter of the game, they know in exact detail. Dan always knew in total detail, right from KCD1, he knew exactly what the answer to any question was for this character. So I had the benefit of these intelligent, talented, generous, patient people who literally I don't think I've ever asked a question about him or a scenario that he's in that they couldn't answer. I literally can't remember that
Wow.
in doing this. And I don't mean like answer quickly. The only time we'd ever get into knots was over translations, and that happened quite a lot inevitably. So we might be like, what exactly does that mean? But they always had the original check, and they always had someone available to answer the question almost immediately. But in terms of how do you sort of remain precise, I just if I wasn't sure, I'd just ask and I keep asking, probably quite annoying. But until I really understood exactly where he was and exactly the choices that had got him to where he was. And if I needed another go, I'd ask for another go, and they'd always say yes. And that's where I think, yes, it's taken us a long time to get it, but I think it's been really, really worth it because that level of precision, I think we've got. I mean, it's not really for me to say; it's for the players to decide that. But we definitely put the time and effort in. Whether or not it was worth
It
it,
was worth it. Don't you
we'll let
worry.
the world decide.
I couldn't stop laughing at the scene with the Cumans where you get drunk and I mean, that must have been fun to. Do you remember that? I know because you've done
I
so
do,
much, it's
and
hard to remember
no, I
everything.
do, I do,
Yeah.
and do you know the nice thing is there's so many moments like that in the game,
Oh,
and
so many.
really help on those long days where, let's say, you've done like a really emotional bit with the family, or probably even more challengingly, you've just done something that's very information based, like the herbs or whatever it might be. Then
Yeah.
you get to like the scene with the Cumans, and it's just fun and silly and so
Oh,
well written, and translated, and singing in
bit of
Hungarian,
singing. Yeah.
all this stuff, like and they on the one hand they took it very seriously, so like there was someone in house who spoke Hungarian that would come and make sure, but ultimately with that stuff you go, actually Henry doesn't speak Hungarian. Part of the gag is that it's a bit stupid,
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
so you have to get it right to then get it wrong again. So they were really precise with stuff. But then conversely they were also super fun, so it'd be like, do all your homework, take it really seriously, make sure it's the best it can be, but most importantly have fun, and we definitely did that.
How do you differentiate singing with drunk singing, though? You know, it's
I
just
mean,
there's an art to it. You know,
maybe I'm a method actor. I never drank in the booth, I promise.
they are long
Uh,
days. Yeah.
well, it's a funny one because that gets talked about a lot with actors, doesn't it? In terms of like, if you play drunk, you've already failed. Like you have to
Yeah.
you have to be a drunk person trying to be sober. That's the sort of received wisdom as to how to get right. But with this stuff, I mean, he's so drunk in some of that stuff that I think I'd like to just be really stupid and have a laugh. And yeah, those moments of light relief were really helpful in motion capture, but especially in voiceover, where you're like on your own in a booth for 8 hours. Usually I would lay my lines down first, so I'd never had the other person's line coming back to me, which was
Yeah.
really difficult because you're kind of
Oh,
like, I don't
yeah.
know necessarily what the pitch of the scene is. I'm having to set the pitch, and so in terms of keeping your brain on, that was obviously a bit of a monster marathon
Hold
challenge.
on. So you're never hearing anything ever?
No, so towards as we went through it, so as we got towards the end of the voiceover, often other people would have been in and recorded the other side. So
So it's
so
the
towards the
initial.
tail end,
Yeah.
but at the beginning, they just did pretty much all of my stuff first. So I'd say
Mm.
probably about 80% of it, if not more, I was.
Wow.
So the director will read it back to you, but they, by their own admission, are not actors. They're not always native English speakers. So they're brilliant actually for what they're doing, and they're brilliant in terms of the actual direction. But you're not getting back what the player will hear. You know,
Well, what about that final scene? Not to jump ahead, guys, to spoilers, but typically it'd usually be like in a game it'd be a boss fight, but this one's like it's a in front of the fireplace, a really intense chat. Are you? Because that's not mocap, right? That's
can
voice.
I be precise about which, without spoilers? And I don't know if you can answer this question about
Yeah,
which scene. Are you talking about with the family, or are you talking about with a certain
with a
person?
with a certain person that may have done some bad things. Yeah,
Okay, right.
yeah.
Yes, that was motion capture.
It was, yes, okay.
Yeah, yeah, it
So
was,
you've
and
got him there, and yeah, okay.
yeah, so that's kind of the easiest bit actually, because even though you're all dressed head to toe in lycra and you're covered in dots, and there's no actual set around you, you do at least have another actor in a chair, a brilliant actor in his case, in all the cases of this game. So that's kind of easy because then obviously as you branch out of those cutscenes, then you're like often talking to no one. But in the actual physicality of those big anchor scenes, luckily for me, you are talking to a person, which makes it a lot easier.
And once you see, I don't know if you've seen much of your work on YouTube or whatever, but especially that scene, I had chills. The music swelling, it really lifts the scene, the intensity. You've played like 100 hours, and you get to that, and it's just,
Yeah,
it's just,
well, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned the music because Jan Balter and Adam Sporker, who do the music, are just insanely
ah,
talented. And I knew that because I'd heard their music in isolation before. We did a marketing video where we heard them playing in this
yes.
incredible building called Rudolfinum in central Prague, which I had been in before but never heard music played there. It's got the most insane acoustic, and it blew my mind that I didn't know at that point which scene those pieces of music were going to be attached to. So when you see it, you use the word lift, and that's exactly what it does. It just kind of lifts and elevates everything, whether it's a funny scene with a kind of Henry song or whether it's a kind of epic dramatic moment. It's truly cinematic, and that blew my mind. But yes, absolutely. When you're doing the scene itself, a bit like TV filming, you're often doing it out of sequence. You might have done something in the morning that was completely different, but because of the availability of certain actors and like various
Yeah.
logistical things, including COVID, which we were battling the first time. You're
Oh,
bouncing
of
around.
course.
So that's why, like the voiceover, you become incredibly reliant on the directors to know where you are in the story, what's gone before, what's maybe going to come after, um, and what the kind of emotional stakes and dramatic stakes are of any scene, because you don't know. And even though they gave me a sweep of the whole story at the very beginning of that process, it's so enormous. Like you, on any given day, you really need to be reminded as to exactly which bit of the story you're in and where he's headed.
Is there a scene that impacts you the most to this day across this game where you go, yeah, this springs to mind?
Yeah, the family scenes, they really.
With your father and mother?
Yeah, again,
Yeah.
because I don't know where people are at in the game, I won't say too much in terms of the extent and the
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of medium within which they appear in the second game. But I don't think it's spoiled to say that they're still there. Of course, they would be there in some way, shape, or form because they're such an engine of Henry's story. But I think, I don't want to harp on about this too much, but I lost my dad a long time ago, and you go all those things which are really personal. Uh, with without again, I've said this before, but without it being a straight line between my experience and Henry's. That's not because I don't know how healthy that is, but inevitably those kind of epic moments in your own life are in your bones and in your nervous system, whether you like it or not. So if you're then playing a scene, doesn't have to be a parent, it could be anyone, but in this case it was a parent. It's inevitably in the kind of fiber of you, and so and that's one reason, but another reason is just more um, creative, I suppose, in that they are so the engine of Henry's story. They're, because of what happens at the beginning of KCD, they are the thing that drives him through all his choices, and whether he goes into darker corners in the second game, or whether he goes into, if whether he kind of remains more true to the Henry of the first game, who's more kind of ethically sound, I suppose. It's all because of what happened to him, what happened to them, and so those scenes, and particularly the kind of later scenes in the second game, um, I found really moving. And actually, so Dan directed all the kind of core stuff throughout both games. But in the second game, because there was so much, there was a bigger team of people, including a brilliant guy called Pepe, where he did do, he was there for every scene.
Hmm.
But Dan came back for those anchor moments, and both in voiceover and in performance capture. I remember it just being like Dan and I, it wasn't just Dan and I, there were other people in the room, but it was a much
Intimate.
quiet.
Yeah.
When we got to that stuff at the end, it was a really quiet day. In my mind's eye, it was like a Friday afternoon, but I might be kind of romantically painting that in. It was like I remember a kind of feeling of ending to some, because when we knew where we were in the game, and it was really moving. And I think Dan and I and the entire Warhorse team, but we've kind of built this character together, and we've been on this journey of building this figure that was born. It's his brainchild. It came out of his brain and his heart, and I had the sort of privilege of bringing him to life. But sort of those scenes where the family stuff is sort of not resolved, because it's none of, that's not something that will ever be fully resolved, but it's a big flag in the sand for his story. And I found those always really moving. I really enjoyed those scenes, and I guess in many ways they were sort of most rewarding from an acting perspective, because all the fun silly stuff, all that is super fun, but you go in terms of like actually really challenging yourself and kind of the emotional depth of that character and all that stuff. That's where I got to really kind of dig those, kind of mine that.
For me, anyway, I feel like it would be impossible to, if I'd lost someone and then the story is similar, to not
Yeah.
think of that person in your personal life,
Well, it's a really interesting question, because I think I never would, and I don't, personally speaking, I don't sort of consciously play the scene and think about them, because I don't. For
No.
me, I don't know how healthy that is. But you're absolutely right in terms of, you may not be doing it consciously, but your body's doing it. Whether you, like, inevitably in any moment of anything you act, you're only drawing off things that you've either most likely experienced or at least seen in the world. Of course, that's the only way you can act. And I have such respect for however any actor gets there, whether they're like fully method or whether they just kind of put out a cigarette and run into the scene. And, as long as people get to where they need to be, that is entirely their prerogative.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right that anyone who's experienced anything vaguely like that, whether you like it or not, that's going to be bubbling up through your system in those moments.
Are
So
you cigarette or are you method? Or are you somewhere in the middle?
um, probably somewhere in the middle. I think I'm not. I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm definitely not method in terms of actively, consciously in the moment drawing on my own experience because I do think you have to be a little bit careful with that in terms of your own well-being and um, that's just for me. Again, I fully respect people that do that. I'm not a cigarette in that I'm probably a bit more I trained at a drama school here for 3 years and it was like a very sort of it's a theatre training essentially and it's quite robust in terms of its detail and so it gives you this big toolkit and once you've got
Yeah.
that toolkit you feel a bit lost if you're not using it so I'm probably a bit more forensic in terms of like doing my homework like but on a lot of time that's just to make me feel better is just to feel like I've done the homework hopefully it feeds into the work but that's just how I work but everyone's very very different.
You just like to prepare meticulously,
Yeah,
so you've got
I
all
like
the
to know.
tools. Yeah.
Yeah, I like to come in with like certainly ideas and knowing what I think is going to happen, and inevitably, especially on a job like KCD, that will change because you're working with people who, I guess, unlike some TV and theatre jobs, they know the material inside out. They know exactly what it's going to look like. So you have like a sort of rough animatic of a kind of crude execution of what it will be, but they know exactly what they want, and so I put my faith in their hands pretty exclusively, which I would always do with a brilliant TV director and writer, whoever it was. But that it's more of a fluid process, I think, often because TV directors haven't necessarily written it, so that makes it more fluid. In theatre, you might have like 6 weeks in a rehearsal room, so the whole point is that you spend a lot of time working stuff out and trying stuff that isn't going to work. But with the game, on the one, I mean, there's loads of room for maneuver in our input. They're brilliant for that, and you absolutely have a sense of autonomy and control. But also, there's something weirdly liberating about going, especially with Dan, it's like who this man is. You wrote him, like you created him. So I'm going to let you lead me down that path of where you want him to go, and he's always done that so clearly and brilliantly. And in many ways, that's made my job a lot easier.
Now I've got to ask you about getting out of the crimes. I mean, this has taken everyone just absolutely loves the excuses that Henry comes up with. From there's a bee on my purse to the animal called me an asshole. I mean, who came up with this stuff?
I think it's
Oh,
again everything at Warhorse. It's a collaborative effort, so it's a team of brilliant writers,
oh,
many of whom are writing in Czech in the first instance,
yeah,
and then through the filter. So I'm going to mention his name, but it seems unfair because there's a
there's
sea
so
of
many.
people
Yeah,
that I've just mentioned who who are writing the kind of original text. But then it goes for the English version. It goes through the filter of a few brilliant translators, but a kind of lead translator called John Comer. And he speaks fluent Czech, and he's not the only one. I will say there are others, and they're all absolutely brilliant. But John, since the first game, has been the kind of lead on this, and he's brilliant at like translating idiom, and he's also really funny. So like he knows what the gag is in Czech. Often there's not a direct version in English, so he'll find something equivalent, and he does it like not just well, but really
wow.
quickly. So it's not just him. He's incredibly talented, and he's
I know.
but it is, but there are just these people that are just funny. They've just got a good sense of humor, and they all know the character like I do really well now. So they kind of know, and they also know the audience. I think we've got this. Aside from the fact that they're incredibly loyal and passionate and intelligent, our audience is really funny. That I think I'm biased, but
No, they are. Yeah.
they've got a really good sense of humor, and and so I think they give the people what they want, right?
This is actually one of the coolest fan bases I've seen for a game.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I've come to learn that. I mean, I did know that on the first game, but I didn't have any online presence. I was historically, I've not really had a massive online presence really, but I knew it was going on, and I had a really kind of strong discourse, kind of behind the scenes, if you like, with the people at Warhorse to know what the conversation was, and I absolutely know who those key people are, and this what in the first instance was quite a small group of people, many of whom supported the Kickstarter campaign that made this whole thing happen in the first place. And their numbers have grown over time. But that sense of play and intelligence and fun and support and positivity, actually, I suppose, is the word that I'm really looking for, has been overwhelming. And I'm very, very aware that is not, I say I'm not a gamer. I'm not a massive gamer, but I definitely know enough about the gaming world. And certainly now it's a world that I've become incredibly fond of and respectful to, and particularly our fan base is like I do have a really forensic understanding now of what that is, even if I'm not kind of talking about it all the time. I absolutely know that, and I'm really grateful for it because not all games. Well, not only do not all games have that, most games don't have that, and we're really, really blessed.
Are you looking to plug yourself in, if you could, to any other game in franchises? Have
As
your
an
eyes
actor,
on it? Yeah.
yeah, I definitely, yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I kind of now that I have on its base level a better understanding of that world, but it's much more than that. It's kind of my my knowledge now of what you can do creatively within a game in terms of size and scope, obviously, but
Mm.
the autonomy of the player, the fact that the player is essentially the director, and certainly in this game, you go they get to do whatever they want. You can't do that, and I love TV and film. It's like absolutely the main body of what I do, but you can't do that. That's not something you're ever able to do. And so I think, and obviously with performance capture as well, that we weren't using headcams on the first game, but now that we are for the second game, the level of performance detail and the quality of the writing and all these things is every bit as good as the highest end TV production that I've done. So in terms of like the challenge of the actor, it's every bit as fulfilling. It's challenging in different ways for sure, but it's really rewarding. So yeah, absolutely, I'm definitely up for that. And there's sort of various conversations happening about certain things. But yeah, it's a world that I'm keen to kind of carry on exploring.
Do you find, I don't know from your experience, do you find there's less egos in the gaming versus film or TV? Or
You know, I have to say, and this isn't me just really diplomatic. I've been really lucky in, over 20 years of working. I've never really had any major dramas or any kind of out of control egos on
that's
anything I've
great.
done, like
That's great.
TV, theatre, film, and now gaming.
That's awesome.
I've never really had those, those stories that you hear of people behaving
Yeah.
really badly. I actually never have had that. So I couldn't. There isn't a lot of ego in certainly in Warhorse. But there hasn't been massively on, most of, obviously it's a sliding scale and there have been more on certain occasion, but it's never been out of control. No one's ever behaved really badly. There's been no tantrums of people storming off set. And I also think there's a difference between ego and leadership. So you actually do need a really strong leader. So like in our case, Dan and, various other members of the senior team, um, the two Martins who like run the company, who are, you won't really see very much of, but are kind of keeping the wheels turning in lots of ways, and then everyone in that building doing the same at their various levels. There is a really strong sense of leadership, but
Mm.
in Warhorse it feels more egalitarian than perhaps the like British culture. It feels a bit more like
Yeah.
everyone is allowed a voice a bit more, I think, than I've experienced in other media. Um, but like I say, there's a difference between just being a tyrant and having a huge ego and just leading well. And I think certainly in the case of Warhorse, they're just good leaders, and I've been blessed with that in my other work as well.
Can I ask, do you feel like a leader as a main character in this game? Like, is there a sense of responsibility?
Yeah, that's a really good question that I hadn't really thought about before. But yeah, I do because I suppose on the performance capture stage, I'm the only person that's there every single day because obviously it's Henry going in and out of each scenario. So he's not always the center of the cutscenes, obviously, but he's always in them for obvious reasons. And so in that respect, like first time round, some of the central characters in the first game I didn't meet until the very tail end of the motion capture. And then in the second game, because there's such a big cast of characters and some of them come in later, they didn't arrive so much later. I think there is a sense of responsibility. This is very similar to a TV set where you have a responsibility to welcome newcomers for sure. Like that's absolutely your job. Because the performance capture space is quite weird and a lot of people might not have done it. I think you have a duty of care, and for want of a better word, to make sure to help people understand that from an acting perspective, because obviously the technical team can do that, but you're the ones doing it. So definitely there was quite a lot of occasions where if I could see someone was thrown, as I absolutely was when I rocked up on day one, to try and help them through that, and obviously not in a patronizing way, but just to be like, look, if you're getting lots of different notes from different areas, unlike a TV set, that's really normal. It's not because you're doing anything wrong. That's just the language of this world. So don't take it personally, which very rarely would people do that anyway. But a sort of a responsibility to kind of make sure everybody kind of felt welcomed and included and comfortable on set. And that is obviously fundamentally that's the job of Warhorse to do that. But definitely as a sort of playable character, there's a responsibility to that. And I really that was a real privilege actually because we had such talented people coming and going. Most of them they need my help or advice, but just being a kind of supportive voice was definitely appropriate, I think.
How would you manage if let's say Kingdom Come 3, Henry's not a playable character and you meet him? How would you
I
feel about that?
Well, from an acting perspective, it wouldn't it would be very similar actually. You kind of
Yeah.
go you're moving it up. I listen. I'm open to all ideas. I kind of we do have a very good sense of what's happening next. Obviously, I can't talk about any of that, but I think those decisions are like not in our hands. And I am open to all ideas. I think this is I love this character. I love this kind of the world of this game, and I think all of those ideas are really
No,
whether
it's not going to happen, but I'm just throwing it out there for you just to,
you never know. You
yeah.
never know. I mean, it's. But I just I'm happy to play this character for as long or as little as anybody wants me to. And I think actually most of that lands. Of course, it's ultimately decided by Warhorse. But really, like the fans kind of dictate a lot of this narrative in terms of what they're into and what they think and all that stuff. And I think that's a really appropriate thing. But yeah, I'm happy to play this character as long as anybody is bothered to listen to me doing it.
Here's one you probably haven't been asked. If you were to read the script, let's say for Kingdom Come 3, and again, I'm not asking you to, none of that. I'm just,
Well done.
no. And I really aren't. And then you're reading the script, there's a death, you're dying. He's got a death scene, right? This is it. How would you feel reading that and coming to terms, this is it? How do you think?
Yeah, I think I'd feel I'd feel really sad. Obviously, there's famous footage, isn't there, of like big TV shows where that happens. They
Yes.
read through, and often people haven't seen the scripts before they arrive, and exactly what you're describing happens. And I would obviously I'd feel really sad, but I'd also I'd know it would be happening for the right reason. But of course I would feel sad. It's I've spent longer playing this character than any other character I've ever played. Um, and I would, but I'm pretty sure Warhorse would give me the heads up. I don't think they'd just like send the
No,
script.
no, yeah, of course, yeah.
Um, I feel really sad.
They're not going to just
But the
throw
other
you.
thing
Yeah.
to say is, as we know, and again, no spoilers, just because you're dead in the world of KCD doesn't mean you can't appear.
Hey, true. You'll
So,
probably be back
I guess
anyway. Yeah.
I'd feel sad, but I'd be like, I'm just going to float out of the clouds and start talking to people.
It's kind of like Star Wars.
Love it.
What is it? What do you call them? The Jedi ghosts? What the name?
Yeah, I don't know the name, but
Yeah, you
my
know what I
point,
mean.
which tells you a lot about me, is the Lion King.
Oh,
Happens.
goodness me. Have you had a chance to play the game yet or what?
Yeah, I a tiny bit, but what I'm doing is I've watched quite a lot of it. I've watched a lot of other people playing it, and I'm sort of deciding like because I haven't actually had time yet in terms of like all the interviews and various things, but I'm sort of deciding like how best I would like to do that, whether I'd like to do it sort of publicly or privately. I kind of part of me is like I'd love to just bury myself in a room and do it, just for me essentially. But I don't know. There's lots of different ways for me to kind of crack that egg, and I'm just sort of taking my time and kind of
You are thinking about streaming or something like
I don't
that?
know. Maybe. I mean, I don't know is the honest truth, but I do. Uh, I don't know. I feel like I'd only ever get to do it once for the first time. I mean, I can do it a million times in the various iterations, but it feels like something I want to preserve and get right rather than just rush into. And actually, also, my collector's edition hasn't arrived yet. They're mailing it to us. So, that's coming, I think, tomorrow to the
Is there a
house.
statue with that of Henry?
Yeah, they're amazing.
Oh,
So we've seen
nice.
them in Prague.
That's
We got
cool.
to unpack stuff together, but then they were like, because they're massive, as you've probably seen, they're going to
Yeah.
ship them to us, and I think that's coming tomorrow. So I'm very excited about that.
So where are you going to put the statue of Henry? Next to the BAFTA award when you win that
My
next
daughter's
year?
bedroom. Oh, you flatter me. Yeah, I don't know. It will get pride of place somewhere in the flat, that's for sure.
How do you feel now that I guess you're moving into DLCs, but how do you feel with the reception and how are you feeling about where the franchise is heading?
I feel really excited. I feel that the reception has just been amazing, like really genuinely overwhelming and sort of incredibly moving. Um, but you're absolutely right to mention the DLCs because what that does on a practical level, it means that actually all the way through that process of the launch, I was already filming the DLCs and doing voiceover. So literally like the day after the launch party, I went in and did a load of voiceover and quite a lot. So it was a bit, but I actually really liked that because I'm someone that like, I really enjoy the party and the buzz and that was super fun. But I'm
Yeah,
also kind of happier being in the workroom, if that makes sense. I sort of,
yeah.
I'd rather get back to the engine room and kind of get the wheels turning. And we never really stopped doing that through that process. And we're still, I'm going out again in a couple of weeks. And so the kind of making of it kind of takes the sting out of any sense of finality. So, whatever happens next, it's like we're still working on this game essentially. And so, unlike a TV show or certainly a play where you do last night and that's it, or with a TV show, you kind of watch the product. You go to a screening with your castmates and stuff, and that's it. And then it's made, and you can't change it. This is obviously not like that. I mean, I'm literally going from an interview into the motion capture studio or into the voiceover booth, and so I really love that. And so I'm sort of back in the room with the people that I love, making the thing that I love, playing the character that I love. And honestly, that's kind of where I'm at my happiest. So yeah, it's really, really helped.
So this might be a dumb question. I'm guessing he's your favorite character you've played.
Yeah, he's sort of. I mean, it's a really hard thing to answer because there's been like some stage characters that I've done that were like, kind of so there's a particular Shakespearean
Molded
role.
you.
Yeah, well, molded me, but also they felt like in sort of creative terms, like mountain climbing. So you go, there's a particular role I did in a Shakespeare play that was I felt like that was a really high mountain to scale, or like a TV show that's lasted for a long time that moves you in a different way. But in terms of like spending time with a character, I've spent more time with Henry than I've spent with any other character, and so it's a different kind of mountaineering. It's like learning a new skill, working in a different medium. But getting to know a character in more detail and depth than you ever would with a play or a TV show, just because the size of the script and the scope of the world is so much bigger. And so inevitably in that respect, it would have to be. But they're difficult things to measure each other by because they're
Yeah,
challenging
I know.
ways, And that's not
I
just me being diplomatic, that's true. But yeah, Henry is the short answer.
know. I feel like it still must be weird to see your likeness in a game, and all these different faces, like the drunk version and this and bloody, I feel like that still must be a weird thing, or do you get kind of
I, 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 lo-
desensitized?
I it is weird. I am a bit desensitized to it from the first game, but it's definitely a weird thing. It's weird. It's weird. Like the artwork for the second game, which I love, was on loads of bus stops in Prague when I went out there. That was obviously quite weird. But I sort of love like the funny glasses and like the Jester outfit and all those like funny things.
Yeah, I've got them on.
I sort of love those, and those are kind of the weirdest, but also the funniest. Those are in some ways my favourites. That you go the crazy stuff that people can do to me and the stuff they can make me wear or not wear. Um, you know, but yeah, I guess it would always be a bit weird that you go a kind of animated version of yourself. For an example would be, that amazing CGI trailer that they did.
Oh God, that
I
was
think
good.
so
That was
that was
incredible. The dancing, is that the one you mean with the
yeah,
dance? Oh,
yeah,
that
it
was
was amazing.
unreal.
We did it with this incredible company called Platouge in Warsaw in Poland. But it was the brainchild of like the incredible marketing and PR team at Warhorse, who are just insanely talented, and their colleagues at Play On, who are equally brilliant and talented, and them joining forces to kind of, I mean, they've done this all the way along, where they know the game so well, they know the fan base so well, they know the characters so well, and so they just know how to do it. But that was, all of those strands coming together to make this thing. And I think in terms of that, I found quite weird to see in terms of seeing my own image, because it's like an incredible movie trailer, like all the trailers were. And I had such a great time working with that team in Warsaw on that. But I didn't know, again, I didn't know exactly how it was going to look. And it's just insanely well executed, as is the whole game. So that's always quite funny to see that you're like, oh right, that's where we were headed with that.
Oh, yeah. I wonder if that was the same team that did the Cyberpunk one in Poland. I do
I know
wonder. Yeah.
it may well have been. They're a
Mm.
kind of leader, I think, in terms of producing that kind of content. And I know, so the actor that who played in The Witcher was there, because obviously that was made there. And I know a lot of them had worked on that game. So it's it's a bit of a powerhouse. Like their motion capture stage is
Yeah.
incredible, and like they were just brilliant. We did that in a day, and they knew exactly what they wanted. They were really fun to work with, but incredibly clear in terms of their direction. And yeah, it looks amazing.
I'll give you a few more. I know you got to run. Thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. Um, if you were to be transported to the world of KCD, would you be a blacksmith? Would you be a swordsman? Where do you think you'd find yourself?
Oh, it's such a good question. It's sort of impossible to answer because there's so many brilliant scenarios. But I think what immediately came into my head when
Yeah.
you said that, can I have two?
Yeah, of course. Of
Can
course.
I have one that is in KCD and one that's not?
Yeah, sure. Go on.
The one that immediately came into my head is a blacksmith in Skalitz, back to the simple life. It's sort of coming full circle, him back, maybe with Teresa, if that's what you choose, whatever you choose as a player. But a sort of, because whoever he becomes and whatever corners of the world he goes into, that's sort of who he is at his core. That's the kind of core Henry. So I sort of see this like rural, simple, drama-free world. That's if I was wanting to actually live as Henry. But
Yeah.
if I was wanting to play as him, I'd want to take him into the like darkest, most insane corners of the world that you can go into. Kutna being an obvious example. But actually, what I was going to say in terms of what isn't in the game, but if you take that idea to its other extreme, him in Prague, which no spoilers, but isn't in this game. If Kutna is a massive step up in terms of the challenges of the world, Prague would be that on acid, and so playing him in that world where he's really stretched and pushed and challenged, that's the world I'd want to play him in. I wouldn't want to play him just sitting in Skalitz doing nothing, but I'd want to live him that way.
I don't kill me, but in these games I tend to sleep around a little bit.
That's
I
all right.
wasn't
That's your
very
prerogative.
loyal
I'm not going to
to.
judge
Do
that.
you think you'll be loyal to Reese, or do you think you'll be like me?
I guess we'll find out. I mean, what I do know is that you can go down a million different routes on that front. So you can do whatever you want. I think I probably because he's so anchored and centered in the first game. I think I would definitely. I enjoyed playing him much more in those darker corners and those sort of more compromised versions of him. Those are inevitably more fun to play as an actor, and so I think that's probably what's likely going to happen when I play him.
Do you know the scene I really love? The duel with Toth, and you get the
Yeah.
sword back. Man, that I had chills in that scene. That was
Yeah, and I
fantastic.
think where a lot of the stuff in the second game when we were shooting it was brand new, it's certainly the new characters were kind of getting to grips with it. All that stuff just carried through from the first game. So when we got to shooting those scenes, same actor, same brilliant actor, um, so you sort of get a lot for free because we absolutely knew the stakes of that when we were doing it. We knew each other. Those were sort of in some ways not the easiest things to do, but the most familiar because we know how they feel about each other. We've done it all in the first game, and so yeah, those were super fun to shoot.
Did you get to throw in any of your own crime punishment kind of excuses? Did you get to throw
That's a
any
good
of
question.
Tom's
I
own ideas?
definitely what we would often do, what we would often do with that stuff is because I was saying about idioms and translating like something from Czech into
Yeah.
English. They were really good about if I flatter myself. I do write for a living. I do write TV as well, but
Oh, you
I'm not
do? Wow.
not as good a writer as like yeah I do, but I'm not, they're better writers than I am. But I definitely there would sometimes be ways where I'd be like what about this, or maybe Henry would say it like that, and they were really open to that. So certainly with all the fun and silly stuff and certainly the excuses, they would if I wanted to throw something in, they would always let me do that, and that was part of why it was so much fun.
What are you writing at the moment? Are you
I've got a TV project in development, which I can't say
nice?
too much about, but it's essentially it is in you could just call it a cop drama. Of course, I hope it's a lot more than that, but
Yeah.
that's the kind of arena in which it sits, and that's in development with the production company over here at the minute. So yeah, I don't
Nice.
quite know. My brain sort of works televisually. I'm always drawn to writing TV over other media, and I don't quite
Really?
know why. But yeah, it's lovely, and it's a really brilliant bedfellow to the acting because you go writing is slow and takes a long time to happen, but you have a lot more autonomy. Whereas the acting happens very quickly and it's like I sometimes call it like the heroine of creativity that you get that crazy shot in the arm and but you don't get to build what it is. You don't get to like make the story and control the story. Actually, that's one lovely thing about Henry. I have a lot more control over him than I would in any other arena. But still, ultimately, it's the brainchild of Warhorse and the people there. Whereas in TV, if you're writing your own material, you can write whatever you want, but then you've got to get it made and get people to watch it, and that's a much longer, slower process. So they work really well together in my brain creatively.
Well, you can also write yourself in.
Well,
Write
it's
yourself
funny you
into
say
work.
that because absolutely you can. But my literary agent
Uh,
said to me rightly, he was like, "Be careful what you wish for if you do that, because when you actually get to shooting it, you're building a mountain for yourself to climb." So actually, I'm not doing that at the
well, they
moment. But
advise against it.
well, he did. I
Oh,
mean, not everybody would, but it depends.
yeah.
Yeah, he did advise against it, and I think he was right to. At least in your first sort of if you're like
Yeah.
30 years into your career and you're churning stuff out more easily and quickly than I am, then it's probably a bit easier. But I think in the first instance, I kind of keep them a bit separate to go, I'm just going to write the best thing that I can and hope that it's executed in the best way rather than sort of shoehorning myself in. But don't get me wrong, I would be open to doing that at some point.
Absolute last one. Sorry, I keep saying this.
All
Would
right, it's my
you,
pleasure.
if Warhorse said, "Look, we'd like to bring you on to help write with for Henry," do you think you'd have the tools to do that now?
I would with their guidance because I think as an actor, what I find when I'm writing TV is my skill set leans much more into character and dialogue than it does kind of story structure. So and luckily in TV, there are people like script editors and script development people whose job it is to help you curate the structure. But they always say what they can't do is make those characters speak or build the character in the first place. So for me, that's the right way around. And I think the same would be true to some extent of if ever that were to happen in the gaming context, because they are the masters of like building the world and kind of building the kind of skeletons of the story. So while I might, I've got loads of ideas where this could go. Not that it's way beyond my remit to kind of make those happen, but so I would definitely have loads of ideas in terms of where Henry might go and where the people might go within that world. Um, but I think in terms of making him speak, I can definitely do that better than any character I've ever um, played or written. But again, that's not. They've got plenty of very talented in-house writers. They don't need me to tell them how to do it. I can assure you of that.
Hey, I'm just throwing it out there.
No, I
Um,
know, and yeah, it's certainly an idea I'll be up for.
Thank you, man, for taking the time today. We really appreciate it. Is there anything you want to
Pleasure.
say to the fans that have tuned in today or been a fan of your
Just
work?
thank you. I mean, it seems a very reductive thing to say, but really, there's no stronger word than thank you because I think yeah, the reviews were brilliant and the kind of anticipation and the kind of build up to it launching were all fantastically executed and exciting. But really, it all means nothing without the players and without the people kind of that swell of support that we have that's still going on. That's literally why we do it. Again, it sounds sentimental to say that, but it's really true. And the game lives or dies by the players and their response and their support. And we've been blessed with this incredible fan base that have just backed us from the get-go and continue to do so. And I really hope that people know that we are acutely aware of that and yeah, and that we value it hugely. So yeah, thank you is the main thing I'd like to say.
And I just want to say thank you, man, for all the hours of entertainment you've provided me.
It's genuinely my pleasure.
Thank you, man. Before I let you
Cool.
go, can Henry say something to Dan to round this one out?
What would you like to say? What about, I think your baby might be hungry.
That's actually true.
Go and feed your baby, Dan.
That's
For those
actually
who don't know,
true.
Dan has a very, very new baby who's probably clearly quite hungry. So I think you better go and help out on that front, don't you?
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Please come back
No, I'd love
soon
to.
onto
It'd
the
be my
show.
pleasure.
Thank you,
Thank you,
brother.
Dan.
Take
No, too.
care.
Thanks for having me on. Take it easy.